السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى. أما بعد، رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما، رب زدنا علما نافعا. آمين. From the previous discussion, it has become clear that the occupation of the Muslim scholars was about creating a balanced narrative or balanced theory about the creation and God. A balance between pure abstract absolutism and the sameness, not believing in or not separating God from universe and from this creation in such a way that he becomes an abstract thought which is not needed by the universe anymore, or not involving God in a way that we are not able to differentiate between the creator and the creation. This was the aim of the Muslim scholars, whether they are falasifa or mutakallimun or any other school of thought or tradition, to create a balanced, because we know our religion is a religion of balance in all affairs. And for that, the fruit, the thamara, which we understood from the previous discussions, is how these scholars cultivated the idea of attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in understanding and in thought and practice. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is active in this universe. This wujud, existence, is the manifestation of his attributes, and at the same time he is not involved in such a way that we are not able to differentiate between the creator and the creation. This is the quintessence or the foundation of our thought, and this is the quintessence of the Islamic thought, because the concepts of Islam are always connected with God. This is what defines us. So they wanted to safeguard some basic premises or foundations about God. We will come to that, inshallah, in today's session, because we will talk about theology. Okay, so the scholars, whether falasifa, mutakallimun or others, they how successful they were is a different question, but this was their aim. Their intention was to create a balanced ideology about God, and the involvement of God in this wujud, existence, is not only in the physical sense, not in the sense of creating or creation, but in all aspects, from all perspectives. So the concepts which define us as Muslims, God is involved in that. God is involved in morality, God is involved in law, God is involved in ethics, God is involved in theology. So from the personal belief system of a human being, of a Muslim who wants to reach perfection by enhancing his morality, and we said morality for some of these scholars is actualizing the meanings of the names and attributes of Allah in life. So God is involved from the personal life to the statehood, the community, the society. God is involved in all affairs. So no concept for us as Muslims makes any sense without the involvement of God. And this is the meaning of God being involved in wujud, in existence, in metaphysical sense and as well as physical. So for example, when we say human beings cannot legislate in Islam, it's only God who can define law. Only God can legislate. Only God is al-hakim. And this is one of the basic foundations of usul al-fiqh. Al-hakim is God. Allah is the only hakim, legislator. So we are involving God in law. And this is the main concept which separates us from man-made laws, from man-made systems. This is the main difference. This is the main point of difference between us and others. But we should understand these matters in a more profound way. So for example, when we say God is al-hakim, God is the legislator, why? Because legislation, law is based on justice, al-adl. And God, Allah in Islam is al-adl. He is the most perfect judge. So his justice is the perfect justice. The concept of adl. Al-zulum, oppression. These concepts which are meaningful and basic to our system, to our thought as Muslims, will be defined by God. And if we take this approach, which is the Islamic approach, adopted by all scholars in the past, this will solve all intellectual problems for us. And also the crisis in practice. Okay, so the involvement of God in life, it creates objectivity in concepts. Otherwise, everything is subjective. How do we define justice? How do we define peace? How do we define zulm, oppression? It will all be subjective. It is God which gives objectivity to these concepts. Okay, so for example, how do we define zulm? We say zulm is, this is how the scholars of ilm al-kalam, if you take any basic text of ilm al-kalam, you will see they define zulm as opposition or disobedience to the command of God. This is zulm. That's why God himself can never be oppressive. So when we discuss about the theodicy problem, the problem of evil, why is there evil and zulm in this world? The main question which we should ask there is, how do we define zulm first? How do we define adl? How do we create an objective concept of adl and zulm? If we remove God from the picture, there will be chaos. On the level of thought as well, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, which we refer, the ayat we refer to them, if it is Allah who's holding the heavens and the earth. If Allah does not hold the heavens and the earth, this existence will fall. It will cease to exist. This applies to the physical realm as well as to the intellectual realm. It is the concept of God which gives sense to everything. Otherwise, how will we define morality, ethics? And those who champion the cause of the West in the Muslim world, they should read about the Western thought from its original sources. Take the example of ethics. Get acquainted with basic works of ethics by the Western philosophers, and you will realize it is a total mess, chaos. And this is the first point which they discuss, subjectivity of ethics. Ethics is subjective because they don't have any foundation to create objectivity in these concepts. Okay, so the involvement of God, which was the main occupation of these scholars, to preserve, protect, safeguard the fa'iliyyah, the activeness of God, okay, not retiring God from the universe, was the main objective of these scholars, as we saw. And they created the theories on the ontological level, on the level of theology, in thought and practice for that. This was the main aim. So God is involved in history, God is involved in space and time, God is involved in everything. So for example, we took the example of adl and dhulm. Who will define it? It's subjective. So they say dhulm is, oppression is not obeying the command. And for Allah, there is no higher authority who commands Allah. Allah is the highest authority. That's why dhulm can never be imagined about Allah. Because this is the definition of dhulm according to us. Not obeying the command. Because the command of Allah, al-amr, it is the manifestation of the perfect knowledge, perfect hikmah, perfect wisdom, and perfect competence of Allah. It can never be oppressive. Okay, so these concepts, if we know the context and then we study the book of Allah, the ayat of the Quran will make sense to us. For example, this ayah in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refers to this matter of mas'ala of the command. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Anbiya, ayah 23, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, 22 and 23, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا فسبحان الله رب العرش عما يصفون لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. Had there been within the heavens and the earth gods besides Allah, they both would have been ruined, chaos, destruction. So exalted is Allah, Lord of the throne, above what they describe. He is not questioned but about what he does, but they will be questioned. So Allah is not questioned about what he does. Why? Because there is no higher authority who commands Allah. Allah is the highest authority who will command. He will not be questioned because his amr, his command, is based on perfect knowledge, perfect hikmah, wisdom, perfect competence, qudra. So this is, when you define dhulm in this manner, you say dhulm is disobedience to the command. Same applies on other concepts. So what I'm saying is that the main occupation of these scholars was to protect and preserve and safeguard the activeness of God in the universe. So our God, the concept of God in Islam, is not of a retired God who is so absolute that he is not involved in space and time anymore. Okay, and he is not so much involved that he becomes the creation, or we are not able to differentiate between the creator and the creation. So this was one of the main occupations. And for this reason, you will see even philosophers like Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina is considered a philosopher. The mutakallimun, the mainstream scholars, they did takfir of Ibn Sina. They declared him kafir, whether it's Imam al-Ghazali or Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, Ibn al-Qayyim. Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, rahimahullah, he calls him taghut, the epitome of transgression in thought, in his An-Nuniyah. This is famous. So the mainstream scholars, muhaddithun, fuqaha, they were against philosophy. Okay, and there are misconceptions on both sides. I'm not going into that. The point is, even Ibn Sina, these philosophers, they are famous for translating the legacy of the Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle. Right? But our philosophers, the Muslim philosophers, in translating this legacy, benefiting from it, they did not apply the methodology of blind imitation in that. They did a critique of the ideas which they took from the Greek as well. And this is the genius of our scholars. If you go to the original sources, you will realize that. So even Ibn Sina, because after all, he was a Muslim. He was not a non-Muslim, he was a Muslim. And in Islam, there is a particular concept of God. And in that concept, activeness of God is very important. God is involved. كُلَّ يَوْمٍ هُوَ فِي شَأْنٍ, which we discussed. In order to safeguard that, preserve that, he criticized Aristotle, or the idea of Aristotle about the haraka, the movement of this universe. Aristotle calls God the prime mover, movement, because Ibn Sina, as a philosopher, as a turjuman of the legacy of Aristotle, but he was not able to digest these ideas as a Muslim. So even Ibn Sina, he did his best in preserving the idea of active God. Okay, so he does not accept it, because the idea of prime mover is basically about retiring God from this universe. Yani, God has created the movement, or God has pushed this universe towards existence, and then yani we are thankful to this God. We say, oh, we are very thankful that you have pushed us to movement, you have pushed us to existence. We were non-existent. You are the primary mover, and the philosophy of this universe is based on cause and effect. So God is the primary cause, God is the primary mover, but this universe does not need you anymore. So very thankful that you moved us, you created us, but this universe, we are free to do whatever we can. You are, we will remember you on occasions, because we are thankful for this first push. We will remember you in rituals, on occasions, but in our life, we don't need you, as the universe does not need you anymore. So you are like a watchman, very skillful watchman, who has created a sophisticated mechanical clock, which does not need the watchman anymore. This is the crux of the idea of Aristotle, the primary mover. Okay, so I want to share and read from the original sources in this session, so that we taste our scholarship and we understand how important it is to engage with our legacy in original language, Arabic, in original, with the original sources. So here we have, for example, this is a treatise of Ibn Sina in explaining Sharh of Aristotle. This is what they did. They wrote commentaries, translated the legacy. They wrote commentaries on the Greek philosophers, agreeing with them sometimes, disagreeing with them. What is prominent in the work of Ibn Sina and other philosophers? So three philosophers are very important when we take the philosophical tradition into consideration: Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, and Ibn Sina. These are very important. And Imam Al-Ghazali, in his refutation of the philosophers, it was mainly about the critique of two philosophers, Farabi and Ibn Sina, as we discussed. We must know that in benefiting from the Greek philosophers in the areas of natural sciences, medicine, astronomy, and all these worldly sciences, at the same time, they maintained a gap, or they maintained a reservation in accepting their ideas in the field of ilahiyat, in the field of metaphysics. So in physics, they accepted, they nurtured it. They don't, as we said, they did not, if you study the original sources, they did not imitate, they did not adopt blind imitation, even in physical sciences. But in metaphysical sciences, they preserved the legacy of Islam in their own way. There may be faults, deficiencies, or shortcomings, mistakes. Okay, that's why if you read the works of Ibn Sina about the physical sciences, natural sciences, medicine, and all these sciences, you will see that they are representing the legacy of the Greeks with some additions, alterations. But when it comes to metaphysics, ilahiyat, they were staunch opponents of the same people whom they represented in other sciences. This is very clear if you go to the original sources. So in ilahiyat, Ibn Sina, Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, they were influenced more by Mu'tazila, Mutakallimun. And Mutakallimun, they are the mainstream scholars who represent the Islamic thought. Mu'tazila, Asha'ira, Maturidiyya, and then the the Puritan Hanabila, right? So Ibn Sina does not agree with Aristotle in these matters. This is very interesting. So ilahiyat, don't mess with us in ilahiyat. We will benefit from you in other areas, but ilahiyat, you have to. Why? Because our concepts in ilahiyat, our concepts in metaphysics about God, about religion, are more mature, as we said. Okay, and this is the same point which Ibn Rushd raises in his refutation of Ghazali. Okay, he says, you have not understood Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina did not agree with the Greeks in ilahiyat, in metaphysics. So one example is here. We can take this example about the concept of primary mover, referring to God as primary mover. Or this movement, concept of haraka, movement, is an intrinsic quality of this universe. And this haraka shows that this wujud, existence, has been created. And the creator is the mover who does not move. And this is the language of Aristotle. So for example, this treatise of Ibn Sina, which is Sharh Kitabi Harf al-Lam li Shaykh al-Ra'is Ibn Sina. Of course, it begins with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bil Aziz al-Hakim, Athiqu alayhi atawakkal. I trust in Allah, I rely on Him. Bil Aziz al-Hakim. So he's referring to the attributes of Allah. Okay, so philosophers did not deny the attributes. This is a naive thought. Mu'tazila, they rejected the attributes. No, it's all about interpretation. We'll not go into that. Now you see here, he is refuting the concept of primary mover. So he says, Ibn Sina says, قبيح أن يصار إلى الحق الأول من طريق الحركة ومن طريق أنه مبدأ الحركة. It is hideous, ugly, wrong to reach the ultimate truth. Ultimate truth is Allah. من طريق الحركة, by the method of movement. ومن طريق أنه مبدأ الحركة, and referring to him as the primary mover. And this is hideous, قبيح, wrong. And then he says, فإن القوم لم يوردوا أكثر من إثبات أنه محرك ليس أنه مبدأ للوجود. The epitome of these people, and by qawm he is referring to the philosophers, Greek philosophers, particularly Aristotle. The ultimate or the epitome of their thought is attributing to Allah that He is the primary mover, not mabda'un lil wujud, not the perfect creator, or not the origin of existence. So they are not referring to God as the origin of existence, because when you say origin of existence, it means He is involved in existence. This is the meaning here, but only as muharrik, as a mover. So He has pushed it, moved it, then khalas, He has retired. He has nothing to do with. And this concept of retired God, it comes from Aristotle, and it has manifested in the form of atheism. Western civilization has turned into atheistic civilization. And wallahu alam, we need more research into this. Maybe Christianity was a reaction to this concept, because Christianity involved God so much in this creation that God became human being. We will come to that. Then he says, wa ajza, how wrong it is, how naive it is. أن تكون الحركة هي السبيل إلى إثبات الأحد الحق الذي هو مبدأ كل وجود. How bad it is, how wrong it is, how naive it is to use haraka, the concept of movement, or this method, in proving the ultimate reality, the ultimate truth, which is God. الذي هو مبدأ كل وجود, who is the origin of all creation. Okay, so here in this treatise, Ibn Sina is criticizing, refuting Aristotle Why is he refuting him? And these are the philosophers who translated and they became the champions of Greek philosophy, and they wrote commentaries, because this is about ilahiyat. This is about metaphysics, which even Ibn Sina is taking from Islam. He does not want to take it from the Greek philosophy. Okay, so if we move further into this, we see, for example, at another place, he explains the meaning of the meaning of the primary mover. How does Aristotle understand it? Then he says again here, he says, "Wallahu ta'ala narfa'uhu an an naj'alahu sababan lil harakati faqat." We, Wallahu ta'ala narfa'uhu, we consider Allah above. We consider Allah above, then referring to him as only as the cause of the movement, as the prime mover. So narfa'uhu, we consider Allah exalted than this, and this is wrong when referring to God. بل هو مفيد وجود كل جوهر يمكن أن يتحرك فعلا عن حركة السماء. But the right method or the right idea is considering him مفيد وجود. Mufid, he is the giver or the originator of all existence, because Mufid means involving God into this universe. Okay, so this is Ibn Sina refuting Aristotle. Then he says, فَهُوَ الْأَوَّلُ, he is the first, and his existence is perpetual. وَهُوَ الْحَقُّ, he is the ultimate truth. وَهُوَ مَبْدَأُ ذَاتِ كُلِّ جَوْهَرٍ, he is the originator or the origin or the origin of all existence, of all ajsam, of all bodies. وَبِهِ يَجِبُ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ سِوَاهُ, and it is his being which necessitates all creation. Okay, again, he is refuting Aristotle. And when we go back to the original source, to the works of Aristotle, we see how clear Ibn Sina is. Yeah, he is not biased, or he is not confused about Aristotle. For example, I have here the metaphysics of Aristotle from the complete works. So if you go to metaphysics of Aristotle, he refers to God in this way in many places in his metaphysics. So these are the complete works of Aristotle. For example, he says here about change, movement, the final cause, referring to God as the final cause. The final cause then produces motion as being loved, but all other things move by being moved. You see, the concept of ishq and ma'shuq, love. So God loved himself. That's why he pushed this existence from being non-existent to wujud. And this universe or this existence is moving towards God because this movement is the movement of love. And this is a different, I don't want to go into the details here. He says, this is from Aristotle, the first mover then exists of necessity, darura. And insofar as it exists by necessity, its mode of being is good. And it is in this sense a first principle. Okay, so this movement, the first mover, Ibn Sina does not accept this, in spite of the fact that he is the Turjuman of the Greeks. This is exactly, this concept of God was refuted by even philosophers. And when we go to Mutakallimun, of course, we find there how they, and this is about theology, the concept of God. How do we understand God? And how is this concept of God related to our lives? How is he connected with this universe? Okay, so we as Muslims in our times, we need to, particularly those who are working for the sake of Islam, they're activists, they want to create a change, nahda in the ummah, they must understand these concepts in a profound way. Like we said here about the implementation of Islam. Why is Allah the only legislator? Why can't human beings legislate? Because we involve the concept of adl. How do we define adl? How do we define dhulm? And this is all related to metaphysics. Okay, so as we said, from the personal behavior of a Muslim to the implementation of Islam in the society, God is involved on all levels. If we remove God from the picture, there is chaos. And this chaos can be seen clearly in the modern Western thought. In understanding the absolutes, al-kulliyat, ethics, law, morality, all fields of human life in thought. It's very clear. In fact, chaos has become a philosophy now. No meaning in life, no meaning in art, in literature. So God is involved in everything, in language, in linguistics. We cannot discuss that in details, but this is to understand the framework. Okay, so in theology, we will say, in order to understand the principle, we say that the primary motive of the scholars was to create a balanced ideology about God and to preserve and safeguard some basic attributes and qualities of God. Number one is fa'iliyyah of God, activeness of God. Of course, in a balanced way. God is active in this universe. We cannot understand anything, any thought which is connected with human life in any sense without referring to God. This is our claim. So we don't believe in a retired God, in a blind watchmaker, in a primary mover who has pushed this universe and does not have to do anything with this universe. Or we don't believe in a God who is so absolute, so abstract, who cannot be understood, who cannot be involved. Okay, so this exaggerated form of absolutism comes from the Greek, and both Christianity and Judaism were influenced from them, from the Greek thought. So in Judaism, for example, when they refer to the attributes of God, they only believe in negative attributes. You can call it negative theology. Negative attributes. We cannot talk about God in any positive way. We cannot attribute any quality to God, because attributing any quality to God means we are compromising his absoluteness. He is so absolute that we cannot even use a name about God. We cannot use a title about God. And if you study some works on Judaism, they say he is what he is. We don't know even his name. We cannot refer to him with in any form, with a noun, with a verb. We cannot refer to him. He is so absolute. And this is making him so absolute, so abstract, that we cannot connect with him. Okay, that's why at the level of attributes, as Muslims, we all believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when referring to his attributes, we have a dual methodology. We say al-ithbat. The first foundation is at-tanzih, and the second foundation is al-ithbat. At-tanzih, or tasbih, we can call it, is negative theology, not attributing or removing any or not attributing any deficiencies, faults, shortcomings to Allah. Okay, but this first foundation is incomplete without the second foundation, which is ithbat, which is affirmation. So negation and affirmation go both hand in hand, and this is the meaning of even the shahada which we declare as Muslims. La ilaha illallah, negation, affirmation. Laysa kamithlihi shay, there is nothing like Allah. Wa huwa as-sami'ul basir, and he is seeing and hearing. He hears everything and he sees everything. So only negation will not work. Our theology in sifat, in understanding Allah, is based on both negation and affirmation. Only negating is exaggeration, negative theology. Only affirmation is like involving God in this universe so much when we are not able to differentiate between God and creation. So this is a balance. And you will see this in the Quran everywhere. For example, Ayatul Kursi, which is the best ayah from the book of Allah, because it speaks about God. It defines God. You will see both negation and affirmation. Allah is negating faults, deficiencies, weaknesses from God. لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not feel drowsiness, sleep. لا يؤوده حفظهما. Protecting, safeguarding, getting involved in space and time, protecting the heavens and the earth, does not weaken Allah. This is negating weaknesses. And then affirmation also. Al-Hayyul Qayyum. Allah is Al-Hayyul Qayyum. Perfect life, everlasting, and Qayyum. So on and so forth. Okay. So this negative theology, the concept of retired God, the concept of absolute God, exaggerated absolutism, is not our legacy. Those who were influenced by this negative theology, they were either influenced by the Greeks or by the Jews. Okay, that's why Jews, if you ask them, who is your God? What is his name? They would say, we don't know his name. And for us, using a name for God is shirk, because he is so absolute. You can see it here. Another book, Dilalatul Ha'irin, is a work of Jewish theology by a famous Jewish philosopher of the medieval age, Musa ibn Maymun, Maimonides, Moshe bin Maimun in Hebrew. He was a famous Jewish philosopher and scientist who contributed to the Islamic civilization as well. And like in our times, when irrespective of the religion, whoever contributes to Western civilization, we say he's a Western philosopher. He can be Jewish, Christian, agnostic, atheistic. If he is contributing to the Western civilization, we say he is a Western philosopher. Same applies here. And some scholars, Muslim scholars, considered him a Muslim philosopher because he was influenced by the works of Muslim scholars. He himself considers Imam Ibn Rushd as one of his teachers. He says, I studied the works of Ibn Rushd for 30 years. Okay, so there are some interesting facts about him. Like he was the personal physician of Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, Musa ibn Maymun, a Jew. And there are historians, Muslim historians, who doubt about his, did he accept Islam or not? There is difference of opinion about that. There are some scholars who say that he accepted Islam. And there are others who say he accepted Islam in order to protect himself and his family when he was fleeing from Spain. He's from Spain and he died in Egypt. Okay. So for example, see how he refers to God and the attributes of God in his book, Dilalatul Ha'irin, the guide of the perplexed, confused. And he talks about theology, evidences for God, his attributes in this book. Musa ibn Maymun. He's a Jewish philosopher of 6th century after Hijrah. He says, "I'lam, you should know, أن وصف الله عز وجل بالسوالب or بالسوالب هو الوصف الصحيح الذي لا يلحقه شيء من التسامح." You should know that referring to Allah or attributes of Allah by negatives, sawalib, is the correct method of referring to him. ولا فيه نقص في حق الله. It does not contain any naqs, any deficiency or negatives when referring to Allah. subhanahu wa ta'ala. بالصوالب يعني we only refer to Allah in a negative way. Yani Allah is not this, 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 this. And we don't affirm anything to Allah. We don't say Allah has this attribute, that attribute. Allah is this, 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 this. No, we say Allah is not this, that. So this is the meaning of sawalib. Of course, this is from Islam also. Islam has this methodology, but as we said, Islam does not only base its ideology about God on negation, okay, but also affirmation. So Islam combines, creates a balance between negation and affirmation. But here we have only negation. And he says, "Amma wasfuhu bil ijabat," referring to Allah or qualifying Allah by ijabat, by affirmation, attributes of God. Allah is hearing, Allah is seeing, Allah speaks, kalam of Allah. فَفِيهِ مِنَ الشِّرْكِ, it contains shirk, وَالنَّقْص, and deficiencies, مَا قَدْ بَيَّنَّاهُ, which we have explained before. So وَيَنْبَغِي أَنْ أُبَيِّنَ لَكَ أَوَّلًا كَيْفَ هِيَ صَوَالِبْ صِفَات. And then he says, so it becomes important to explain how negatives are attributes of Allah. So according to the Jewish philosophy, and Musa ibn Maymun is one of the main figures in Jewish philosophy, and his commentary, explanation of the Jewish law, Mishnah, Talmud, the Jews have Torah, the book, and the explanation of Torah, Talmud, Mishnah. After that, his work on Mishnah, his explanation of Mishnah is considered one of the best in Jewish legal thought. He wrote it in Hebrew, okay, and some of his books he wrote compiled in Arabic, like this one, because he was well versed with Arabic. So this referring to God in only negative sense, negative theology, is the quintessence of the Jewish thought. Okay, and those who picked it, the Jews were influenced by the Greeks, and this is also basically negative theology. Negative theology. The Greeks, as we said, Aristotle, the primary mover, retiring God, or making God so absolute, like here in Jewish philosophy, that we cannot refer to him in any positive way. We can only refer to him in a negative sense. So if someone asks me, what is the name of God? We say, no, saying this is shirk. We cannot, he's so absolute. Now, making him so absolute and abstract is a problem. We need a God who is near to human beings, who can be understood by human beings, who is involved in this universe. But we don't make him so involved that we are not able to differentiate between him and the creation, like the mistake of Christians. That's why I said Christianity, wallahu alam, this needs more research, is a reaction to this, because Christianity, it started in the Roman Empire, the Hellenistic age, after Hellenistic age. So it was influenced by the Greek thought, without any doubt, and also Islamic thought, like one of the most prominent Christian theologians, Thomas Aquinas, the famous, he was influenced by the Muslim philosophers. He acknowledges it in his works, or we can clearly see the influences in his works. Okay. Now, if we go to another book written by a mutakallim, one of the best scholars of ilm al-kalam, Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari. Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari is considered one of the main figures in Sunni ilm al-kalam, okay, because he is the founder of a school of thought in ilm al-kalam, al-Ash'ariyah. He has this work about understanding the narratives of different Muslim groups and sects. Maqalatul Islamiyyin, the famous, to understand comparative Theology, this is one of the best books. Okay, because some of these groups, like Mu'tazila, their works have been lost in history. We don't have much works which reached us. Okay. Now, these books are these works on comparative theology are the only works which we can use to understand the ideas of these different Muslim groups. So he called it Maqalatul Islamiyin, the Maqalat of the Islamiyin. They are all Muslims. And this is between Muslims, the polemics and the ideologies, different groups between Muslims. So, for example, here, pure absolutism about God, that God does not have any attributes. He's so absolute, so unique, oneness, maintaining the oneness of God, that negating attributes, and again, attributes is something positive. We are affirming something to Allah. We are saying Allah has these attributes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This was the influence of Judaism. And some Muslim groups also, they adopted this ideology, like Mu'tazila, in negating the attributes of Allah. And the intention was protecting the transcendence of God, which became a problem. So, for example, here, negating the attributes of Allah, like, for example, the knowledge of Allah. We say knowledge is an attribute of Allah. Ilm is an attribute of Allah. But is this attribute part of the being of Allah? Or, of course, we are not referring to a body. Part means, is the mafhum of attribute different from the mafhum of that? Is the mafhum, the meaning of attribute, different from the meaning of being? Or it's one mafhum? And this was a discussion. So, in order to preserve the transcendence of God, they said attributes and that and being of Allah are the same thing. These are nisab only. These are nisab. These are attributions. Like, for example, I'm a father, a brother, a son, son-in-law at the same time, but nothing changes in my being. I'm the same human being. My name is Shu'aib, but these are different nisab. These are different roles. So when referring to my parents, I am son. When referring to my wife, I am a husband. When referring to my children, I am a father. When referring to my mother-in-law, I am son-in-law. Because I don't have father-in-law. He's a shaheed. He was martyred fighting against the Indian occupation. So they say, well, these attributes cannot be. Negative theology, again, negative theology, in order to protect the transcendence of God. Okay. So, for example, inna ilma Allahi huwa Allah. The knowledge of Allah is Allah, basically. It is not something different from the that. Wa inna qudratahu hiya huwa. The qudra of Allah, which is an attribute, we say qudra of Allah, competence of Allah. Hiya huwa. It is the God himself. It is not different from God. So on and so forth. And this is the negative theology of Mu'tazila also, who negated the attributes. And here something which I want to focus is Imam Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari rahimahullah, he says, وَهَذَا أَخَذَهُ أَبُو الْهُذَيْلِ al-Allaf. Abu al-Hudayl is a Mu'tazili scholar, one of their imams, Abu al-Hudayl al-Allaf. The imams of the Basran trend, yani Mu'tazila, they have two main trends. The Mu'tazila in Basra and the Mu'tazila in Baghdad. So he was the leader of the Basran trend, Basra. وَهَذَا أَخَذَهُ أَبُو الْهُذَيْلِ. Abu al-Hudayl took it from, this negative theology, he took it from Aristotle. Aristotle. He took it from Aristotle. See, this is very, and this is ajib. The philosopher Ibn Sina, who is the champion. These philosophers, they champion the cause of Greek philosophy. They are the representatives of Greek philosophy. They disagreed. They did not accept it. But Mu'tazila accepted it. Not in the direct way. And this negative theology, speaking about God in a very absolute and abstract manner, this methodology, Abu al-Hudayl akhadahu, he took it from Aristotle. وذلك أن أرسطاطاليس قال, because Aristotle said or used to say في بعض كتبه, in some of his works, أن الباري علم كله, that the creator or the first prime mover, Allah, God, is the knowledge himself, is the qudra himself, is the life himself, is the hearing himself, is the seeing himself. And he does not have these attributes outside his being. So when we refer to knowledge, we refer to competence, we refer to life, we refer to hearing, seeing, these attributes, they cannot be attributed to Allah in a positive way. These attributes mean the being himself. Okay, this is negative theology. كله فحسن اللفظ إن نفسه وقال علمه هو. His knowledge is he, يعني he is the knowledge himself. وقدرته هي هو. His qudra, competence, is he himself. This is, so Mu'tazila also took it from Aristotle, negative theology. And Jewish philosophy also were influenced by the Greek philosophy in referring to God as so absolute that we cannot even mention his name. We cannot attribute any positive attribute to him. We can only understand God in a negative way. Negative way means the methodology of negation, negating any deficiencies, weaknesses from God, full stop, nothing else. And this negative theology, it affected the Muslims also, and the mainstream Muslim scholars, the mainstream scholars of Ilm al-Kalam, this became their primary occupation, negating any form of ta'til, negating any form of negative theology. Okay, so they wanted to say basically, don't make God so absolute that he becomes an abstract idea, or don't involve God so much like the Christians, incarnation, and the Eastern religions, that we are not able to differentiate between God and creation. Something interesting about Judaism is, in spite of this philosophical position of maintaining the transcendence of God, if you read the Old Testament, you will find God becomes human being. God comes and wrestles with human beings. God came and wrestled with Yaqub, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not an expert of Bible, but still. So how can you, on one hand, you believe in such a transcendence that you cannot even use name for God. On the other hand, God descends and becomes a human being and fights with human beings. Problem. So this is very important to understand. This background, context is important to understand our contribution. Okay. So we have after understanding this, let's go back to the theology aspect. In theology, as we said, there are some basic premises or foundations for the Muslim scholars, which are important for us as Muslims, as even common Muslims. Number one is, when we refer to that of Allah, when we refer to the being of Allah, the only thing which we engage in the being is understanding the proofs for his existence. They can be rational, they can be narrated, Quran, Sunnah. In fact, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has devised or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed some profound proofs, rational proofs for the existence of God if we cultivate them. And this is what mutakallimun did. The mainstream mutakallimun, they cultivated it. Okay, but because of the influences of the modern materialistic civilization of thought as well, in our readings, in our reflection, the modern Western naive materialistic civilizational methodologies are influencing our thought as well, how we think about Islam itself. Okay, so for example, we have a deep and profound method in the Quran, or a proof or evidence in the Quran. We reduce it to something very naive. For example, in Surah Al-Ghashiyah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to reflect on the camel, on the mountains, how Allah created the camel, how Allah erected the mountains, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the heavens, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the earth. Basically, we have reduced it. For example, you will see all these posters about camel, about the nose of camel, the head of camel. There is no doubt that camel, human being, animals, every insect, all creation is a miracle of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in this ayah, Allah is not referring to the camel per se. And Allah is not commanding us to do a research on camel or go and do a research on the mountains. Allah is referring to this is the problem. And if you remember, thought has been reduced to empirical sciences. What can be perceived by the physical senses? What can be perceived by aql, by intellect, does not carry any weight in modern Western thought. Right? So here also, when we read about the camel, we say, okay, we have to see the camel, we have to research, we have to talk about the hump of the camel, the qualities, physical, what we can perceive by our senses. But if you reflect deeply, Allah is talking about a very profound aqli evidence, which is diversity in this universe. Why did Allah talk about camel, mountain, heavens and earth? There is no relationship between camel and mountains. There is no relationship between mountains and the heavens. Heavens are separated from the earth. The only point is, you see this diversity, which is very unique. Where does it come from? All these diverse things have been created from the same matter, which is one. And matter is dead. Matter does not have intelligence of its own. So diversity must come from outside of this matter. Who tells this matter, or who pushes this matter to be a mountain sometimes, to be a camel sometimes, to be a human being, sophisticated being, to be heavens, earth? Who tells it? Matter does not have intelligence of its own. So this diversity shows there is an intelligent being who has perfect knowledge, perfect wisdom, perfect qudra. He is commanding the matter to be what it becomes. This is the point. Now, this is a very profound aqli argument, which we miss. We get stuck in camel, in his legs, in his nose and stuff, which is also good, fine. Science is good, but rational method or aql is more profound. And as we said, the modern empirical legacy of the West has even separated itself from the early Greek philosophers. The example of Plato, the realm of existence which we can perceive by our senses is unreal. And what we can perceive by our aql is the real existence. The famous example of the cave by Plato. And this reference to diversity, which is a very profound rational proof in the Quran, has been repeated in many verses. So for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again talks about this diversity in Surah Al-Ra'd, ayah 4, Allah says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ قِطَعٌ مُتَجَاوِرَاتٌ وَجَنَّاتٌ مِّنْ أَعْنَابٍ وَزَرْعٌ وَنَخِيلٌ صِنْوَانٌ وَغَيْرُ صِنْوَانٍ يُسْقَى بِمَاءٍ وَاحِدٍ وَنُفَضِّلُ بَعْضَهَا عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الْأُكُلِ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. And within the land are neighboring plots and gardens of grapevines and crops and palm trees, growing several from a root or otherwise. Diversity. Allah is not commanding us to reflect on the learning the art of cultivating the crops, agriculture, palm trees. This is not the concern of the Quran. Quran is not a book of science. This may be important, but Quran is not a book of science. The point here is watered with one water. Yusqa bima'in wahidin. This is all watered with one water, same water. Where does this diversity come from? Same water, different crops. Same water, different fruits. Same water, different vegetation. Where did this diversity come from? This is the rational argument. So the point is, when we don't know the methodology, we don't have the baggage, we don't have we don't know the context, we miss the point. We are not able to engage as we should. So the first concern of the mutakallimun, the mainstream scholars in theology, understanding the nature of God, is about wujud, the existence of God. Existence of God, we engage only in understanding the proofs for the existence. We cannot know the essence of God. Why? This is out of the scope of the discussion. Then about the sifat, about the attributes. Learning about the attributes is important. We should not take the meaning only from the translation. This is a problem. When we say rahmah means mercy, and then we get confused about the origin of evil. We see children dying, we see children born with a condition, with cancer. We say, where is the rahmah of Allah? We see people being butchered, children being killed. Where is the rahmah of Allah? Confusion, because we took the meaning from the translation. We thought rahmah of Allah means soft-heartedness. Soft-heartedness is not the meaning of rahmah. Rahmah is an attribute. It has its own meanings. It has its ta'alluqat. We have to understand it from Quran and Sunnah. How and understanding attributes in the light of other attributes. Understanding the rahmah of Allah in the light of adl. Understanding the rahmah of Allah in the light of qahr. This is important. The problem is we take it from the translations. But of course, we cannot go into the discussion about attributes. If we study matan text about theology, we can go into the details. We're only concerned about the framework here. So point number one, about the wujud of Allah, we engage with the evidences, rational evidences or evidences which are based on Quran. And those who refuted the mutakallimun later, the modern Salafi approach, Ibn Taymiyyah is the imam of that. They did not refute aql or using aql. They were only against some particular rational arguments which they considered weak, or confining rational arguments to only few arguments. This is what they were against. So they were against confining adillah to some rational arguments, and in those rational arguments they were against some of the arguments which they considered weak according to them. Otherwise, no Muslim can be against aql. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us aql. Aql is the manat of taklif. Aql is the base of legal responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised aql. Aql is a ni'mah. Allah has praised those in the Quran, those who use aql to the utmost capability, to the utmost potential. They cannot be against aql. If you read them deeply, Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, they were against this. This is not our discussion. So coming to the attributes. In attributes, the mutakallimun in theology, they wanted to create a balanced ideology about attributes, which is between the abstract absolutism of the Greeks or the Jews or any other tradition for that matter, and the exaggerated sameness, which brings God to the realm of space and time, like in Christianity or in polytheistic Eastern religions. They wanted to create a balance. And how did they strike the balance? By balancing the narrative about attributes of God, creating the or basing the methodology on at-tanzih and al-ithbat, on negation and affirmation. Both are important. Both have to be used in understanding the attributes of God in a balanced way. And within that framework, we have difference of opinion between scholars here and there about the details, not about the framework itself. And the third point, and this is the summary of all the sessions in today's session, is they wanted to safeguard, preserve, protect the fa'iliyyah of Allah, the activeness of Allah, not retiring God from this universe. So retiring God can be in the form of atheism, there is no God, or the ideas of the Greeks and the idea of the watchmaker, blind watchmaker, we don't need God. And this basically is the foundation of modern secularism as well. So God, we are thankful. Assalamu alaikum. May Allah reward you. May you be rewarded, O God, that you have created us, you have pushed us. But khalas, now you rest. We don't need you. We will look to our affairs ourselves. Yeah, we'll come back to you. We are thankful. We will thank you on Saturdays, Sundays in the masjid, in the church. But how to run our affairs, we will do it ourselves. This is the problem. This is basically the concept of retired God. Okay, that's why we see Aristotle and these Greek philosophers, they had this concept of God. They talked about God. They had a metaphysics, but at the same time, their worldly affairs were based on their own aql, philosophy. And in the modern West also, So if Aristotle believed in a God, why didn't he involve him in framing a manhaj, a system about life? Because his God is very absolute. He cannot involve him. This is the point. So this fa'iliyyah of God is the prime motive or the prime engagement or occupation of the Muslim scholars to preserve and protect the fa'iliyyah of Allah. And they framed different theories for that. And we saw how profound the ideas of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Arabi are in engaging God with universe. Okay, so this is the crux about the sifat of Allah. So again, theology, which is understanding the nature of God, how is this God involved in history and time, space and time, is the domain of theology. Again, here we said the primary focus is on attributes, because that of Allah, being of Allah, its essence is above space and time. With that, we are only concerned about understanding the adillah. I will end this session with a quote from Imam Ibn al-Qayyim. As we all know, those who are involved in Islamic sciences and stuff, they know that Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim and this modern Salafi thought is against ilm al-kalam, against using aql in aqidah and stuff, which is a naive understanding of Ibn Taymiyyah himself. So listen to this. This is from Madarij al-Salikin, a book on tasawwuf, explanation of a matan, famous text in tasawwuf, Manazil al-Sa'irin, by a Hanbali scholar, Imam al-Harawi. Ibn al-Qayyim wrote a commentary on it. And in that, he is referring to the methodology of mutakallimin, adilla, rational evidences. He says, فَمَا كُلُّ مَنْ وَجَدَ شَيْئًا وَعَلِمَهُ وَتَيَقَّنَهُ أَحْسَنَ أَنْ يَسْتَدِلَّ عَلَيْهِ. It is not that everyone who understands a matter or believes in it with certain belief is capable of using evidences to prove it. So this is not everyone's cup of tea. This is not the capability of every person. وَيُقَرِّرُهُ وَيَدْفَعُ الشُّبَهَ الْقَادِحَةَ فِيهِ. Everyone does not have the capability of what he believes, understands, to refute the doubts about his belief, or to prove it, or to engage with the methodology of proof, or to refute. Everyone does not have this capability. Okay. فَهَذَا لَوْنٌ وُجُودُهُ لَوْنٌ. This is one thing, and its existence is another thing. So he has certain belief, he has iman, he believes in a God, he believes in his attributes, he believes in a system, but he does not have capability of proving it with the system you have created. Yani this is this is what we said about confining rational evidences in a very closed area. فهذا ولكن لا بد مع ذلك من نوع استدلال قام عنده. But he must have istidlal, he must have proof which is established in his heart, but he's not able to express it, or he's not able to repel the doubts about his اعتقاد, about his belief. وإن لم يكن على شروط الأدلة التي ينظمها أهل الكلام. Even if this proof or these proofs are not according to the conditions established by the scholars of ilm al-kalam. Okay. وغيرهم وترتيبها. Even if these evidences are not according to their order or according to the conditions established by the scholars of ilm al-kalam. فهذه ليست شرطا في التوحيد. This is not a condition in tawheed. This is not a condition in aqidah. This is not a condition in belief. The condition is that you must have aqidah based on evidences. But confining those evidences in a closed area or ordering those evidences in a particular way, this is not a condition. لا في معرفته والعلم به. This is not a condition in tawheed, knowing the oneness of Allah or understanding it. ولا في القيام به عملا وحالا. It is not a condition in applying this aqidah and amal, this aqidah and belief in your life. فاستدلال كل أحد بحسبه. Every human being has his own way of istidlal. So what he's saying is basically, he's not against aql, he's not against istidlal, he's not against evidences, proofs. He's against confining the proofs in a closed area. ولا يحصى أنواع الاستدلال ووجوهه. Because the types of istidlal, the types of proofs, rational proofs, cannot be confined. They are unlimited in number. Okay. ولا يحصي أنواع الاستدلال ولا يحصي أنواع الاستدلال ووجوهه ومراتبه إلا الله. The types of istidlal, the types of rational proofs, can only be known to Allah. Only Allah can encompass. So why are you confining the rational proofs in a closed area? If you don't understand Aqidah based on this closed area, your Aqidah is invalid, or you don't have proof. This is a wrong method according to him. وَلِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ هَادٍ. And every nation has a guide. So every nation has a dalil. Every human being has its own way of expression of dalil. وَلِكُلِّ عِلْمٍ صَحِيحٍ وَيَقِينٍ دَلِيلٌ يُوجِبُهُ. For every correct knowledge and certain iman has a guide or dalil, proof, which necessitates it. وَشَاهِدٌ يَصِحُّ بِهِ. Or a witness by which it becomes correct. وَقَدْ لَا يُمْكِنُ صَاحِبُهُ التَّعْبِيرَ عَنْهُ. But perhaps the one who possesses this knowledge is not good in expressing it. Okay. And so on and so forth. So basically, what he's saying is, in Madarij al-Salikin, is that we are not against aql, we are not against proofs, we are not against using rationality, rational proofs in Aqidah. What we are against is some particular rational evidences which we have considered qat'i, definitive, but they have problems. They are not definitive. Or confining rational proofs in a closed area, or arranging rational proofs in a certain order. This is not qat'i. It benefits you. A different order may benefit another person. Or 5 evidences, you're confining evidences in 5 evidences, for example. There may be a 6th evidence which you don't know. This was the argument of Ibn al-Qayyim, or we can say Salafi argument against Ilm al-Kalam, basically, which is very profound again. It is not simplistic. Okay. So khair, the crux is, from the previous sessions, ontology to theology, understanding the wujud, existence, creating a balanced theory of existence, in which existence includes God, in which we don't make God so absolute and abstract that he is disconnected from the wujud, or he has retired from the wujud, and we don't involve him so much that we are not able to differentiate between God and creation, between creator and creation. This was the occupation, concern, motive of the Muslim scholars, and alhamdulillah, they succeeded in it. So the theology we have about God, attributes of God, if you study it, any school of thought, and you have to study basic for basic understanding a particular school of thought, and based on that you can understand the difference of opinion. You can never understand Ibn Taymiyyah, his contribution to theology or his ideas, without understanding Mu'tazila, Asha'ira, Maturidiyya, and philosophers. Impossible. So those who don't understand philosophy and theology, Ilm al-Kalam, they can never understand even Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, because his arguments, difference of opinion is based on that. Khair, this was the discussion about theology, inshallah. And we pointed to the basic principles. If you have noted, inshallah, it will benefit you. We did not go deep into understanding each attribute, because this is, this course is about understanding the overall framework of what we have. We may do that in a theology course in which we take a matan about Ilm al-Kalam and study that. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all these scholars who contributed to the Muslim civilization and to overlook and forgive their mistakes. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us understanding of Deen. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to contribute according to our capabilities in the nahdah of Islam and in the nahdah of the ummah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to support those who support the cause of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may Allah keep us from them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to destroy who intend to destroy the cause of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from them. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by his beautiful names and exalted attributes to cure our sick and to forgive all over that. Here we have completed our discussion about ontology and theology. Inshallah, in the next session, we will move to epistemology. But before that, I'm planning to have a full session on aql, understanding aql. How did Muslim scholars understand aql, definition of aql, types of uqul? Because knowledge, theory of knowledge is based on aql. It is aql by which the faculty, by which we understand knowledge, we understand the types of knowledge, and the project of education is based on aql. So we must have an understanding of our legacy about aql, definition of aql, intellect. How did Muslim scholars understand that? How did they apply it? We will have a full session about aql, inshallah. Make dua for me and my family, and be steadfast, inshallah, till we complete this venture. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.